So here, we're here to talk about 6.0, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about U1 as well, which is coming out this quarter, and some of the improvements there in some of the lifecycle features. And then what we're going to try and do is hold the questions until the end of the presentation, and if you want, you can take notes and so on, and then we'll open up the mics for questions at the end. If you want, and you're not going to be able to stay until the end, or for whatever reason you don't want to ask the question up front, if you write down on paper, leave your email address, you just drop it at the stage, we'll come back to you with an email with an answer for your question. Okay, great. So, standard disclaimer, you've seen this a million times, we don't need to touch upon it. Okay, here we have a two-part series, one for vCenter and its lifecycle, covering the walkthroughs for install and upgrade, also sort of covering the deployment models as they've changed from release to release. And in this release, we're really touching upon making sure we clean up sort of the multitude of ways you could install and deploy vCenter previously, and giving you a little bit more prescriptive ways of installing and deploying vCenter. And then we have this other talk on ESX, upgrade, automation, and then various design considerations around some of the features for ESX and how to deal with the lifecycle of those, and other considerations around VMware tools and such. That, if you want to attend that, I don't think there's any opportunity now, but you should definitely catch the video if you can. So we're really covering the vCenter part here. Okay, why are we here? We're going to cover the 6.0 and some of the U1 features. We're going to talk to you about how do you get onto vSphere 6, and specifically vCenter 6, and then how do you go about your planning, your various options for installing and upgrade vCenter Server 6. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the deployment models, as I mentioned before, and then cover some best practices and some gotchas around the install upgrade experience. So our goal this release, and actually releases moving forward, is really to deliver an enhanced customer experience with our overall life cycle. Now, I know folks have had problems in the past, and we're well aware of them. And what we're really trying to deliver is a really good end-to-end use case, workflow for your upgrade install and your overall lifecycle and managing your vCenter environments. And so this is the goal not only for this release, but the release moving forward. We didn't do introductions actually in the beginning, so I apologize for that. Why don't we do that now?
Yeah,
Mohan?
so I'm Mohan Pateri. I'm a solutions architect for VMware, working for tech marketing.
I'm Director of R&D, Dilpreet Bindra, for vCenter, so I run the vCenter core team. So this goal is moving forward, and we're going to continue to make progress, and hopefully you see some of those improvements in this presentation. So as we go in, we're going to talk a little bit about the 6.0 enhancements, and so let's start off with our platforms. And as you've known in the past, we have two different platforms, one Windows, one appliance. Our appliance in the past with our embedded Postgres database didn't meet full scale. Now it does. So we have parity on scale, and we have parity on link mode support. So we'll talk a little bit about the internals of link mode, but we've covered that base, and so there's no technical difference between your experience for your Windows platform versus your appliance. And oddly enough, if you've caught Ravi on his presentation on performance, our appliance actually performs slightly better than our Windows deployments. So, okay, link mode. So previously, like I said, we didn't support the appliance. We do now. We've changed the replication technology that we use for link mode, and previously we used the Atom-based replication technology. It was quite difficult to get set up and running, and the workflows around it were fairly difficult. Now we have a native replication technology that we're leveraging and we can tell you how to set that up, and we'll talk about that as we talk to you and further about the deployment models, and which deployment models will end up getting you linked mode and which ones won't. Again, we also have started replicating more information from each of your vCenters and sharing that across. So including the roles and permissions and licenses that you were used to in the past, you get policies and tags now as well. So you can share your tags, the tags that sort of represent, say, gold, silver, or bronze across all your linked VCs if you wanted them to. So you have a single notion of what that means. So we'll get into deployment and upgrade, and the first thing to talk about for deployment and upgrade is some of the changes that we've made. So previously you had a situation where in 5.1 and 5.5 you had a number of services, and for some set of these services you could actually deploy them separately from vCenter, the vCenter server itself. And now we've gotten a little bit more prescriptive, and we've brought in those services into the core vCenter server. And then we have this notion of a platform services controller, which is really the evolution of single sign-on, and brings in a few components such as licensing and certificate authorities and certificate stores. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. So these are the two key nodes that we're going to talk through when we get into how you're going to think about deploying your vCenter. And it's really around vCenter server and the platform services controller. But this is the constituent parts in each one of those. Okay. Deployment models. So as I mentioned earlier, you went through an evolution. In 5.0 we had no SSO available, and we didn't have any new deployment mechanism for that. As you went through 5.1 and 5.5, you had SSO 1.0 and 5.1, SSO 2.0 and 5.5, and you had a myriad ways of deploying and managing your various services, including your web client, your SSO, your inventory service. So so the evolution of your SSO node is your platform services controller, and it's no longer just single sign-on. We're adding additional services, and as I mentioned, licensing, certificate authority, certificate store, your service registration across your vCenters, and other services will potentially be added in future releases. The platform services controller does support data replication, as your SSO did in the past. And so you could have a situation where you would have a topology of platform services controllers replicating to each other. For 6.0, you have two key deployment models. One is embedded, where your PSC resides with your vCenter server. And so they're both deployed together and managed together. And this is really the key use case around here is the ease of use and a single VM to manage. Or you have a situation where you have an external PSC and you have VCs that are talking to your external PSC. And the key use case here are around link mode. This is how you would get to link mode, and PSC HA. As I mentioned, we have two different platforms. We have one platform which is really key. The key use case around the appliance is simplified deployment, backup restore, no more Windows licenses, no more external databases, and really trying to reduce your total cost of ownership for vCenter. For Windows, it's your existing platform that you know and love. It allows you to deploy on a physical host, and it has external database support for SQL and Oracle. We really recommend you consider moving to the appliance. I'll pause for photographs. Okay, we're going to talk about install now, and Mohan will walk you through that.
So in 5.5, you might remember that we had two different types of installs. One was a simple install, and the other was the custom install. The simple install was actually simple in the sense that all the components were installed in one host, and it went through. It did not let you customize anything, but it kind of went through each of the different components individually, one after the other, and you had to literally wait for the different wizards to start up one after the other and enter the pertinent information. And there was no real checks to see if some of the requirements that were there was met. So there were some issues with that, and then we kind of, as you'll see in the 6.0, we've changed a lot of things there. And then with the custom install, you're allowed to choose where you deploy things, but you have the same issue with you have to go through 3 or 4 different wizards for every component you're installing, and then have to choose your stuff. So it was kind of cumbersome. You had to babysit the install. And so our goal here, as we said earlier, was to simplify the customer experience. So in 6.0, we have a similar interface for both the appliance and Windows. So you have, and the install piece, right? There's a workflow. So there's one installer. And then it's very similar to install vCenter for Windows as well as vCenter for appliance. So you just basically choose your deployment type. There are two, as we pointed out earlier, your PSC can be either embedded or it can be external. I've got a cough, so. So it can be either embedded or external. So based on that, you would choose. And then all input was validated upfront, right? So that is very important, right? So if you validate all the input as you go through the process, once the install starts, there is nothing to worry about. You could just start your install, take a coffee break, come back, and it's done. So that's kind of the goal of this installation. And then you kind of can choose custom paths and ports even for the embedded deployment or the external deployment. In the past, you couldn't do that. In the simple install, you were forced to choose the defaults, right? And we also have a lot of pre-check functionality to make sure all the things that we require are there. So that's kind of a very important thing here. And so last but not the least, we have a scripted install, which you can use a JSON file as a configuration file for an automated install. And this can be used for either interactive or a silent deployment. Okay. So from an appliance standpoint, the interface has changed. It's become similar to what the Windows install is. The workflow is similar. Here again, you choose the deployment type, either embedded or external. And then we validate all the input up front, and we have a lot of pre-check functionality. So for appliance install to work, there's a gotcha in the sense you have to make sure your DNS is configured correctly. You want to make sure that the name, the host, everything is already in DNS before you even start your install, because it's going to check. So a lot of times in the past, you could have used IP addresses to install. It's no longer the case, right? And so you need to make sure that you create your DNS records for your appliance even before you start your install. And then there's also a scripted CLI for the appliance. You again use the JSON configuration files. This can be used for interactive or a silent deployment. It supports both Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So now let's go look at some of the best practices for installation. So sizing, right? Sizing is very important. For the appliance, There's no real sizing. The sizing is decided upon based on the type of appliance you're deploying. The size of the appliance is either about, you're given an option between tiny, small, medium, large, like that. But in the case of Windows, you need to make sure that a lot of the requirements from a CPU perspective, memory perspective, storage perspective, you have all those requirements met for the install to be seamless, right? And then you need to also look at Windows OS and DB compatibility, the versions of Windows that work with it. We have a compatibility guide you should refer ahead of time to make sure that there's no problem there. You need to use fully qualified domain names. That's very important because we are, as I said, the install process in 6.0 requires proper DNS. So you need to make sure that you use a fully qualified DNS there. And then one thing I would want to point out is that in the past you might have been able to use OVA files or upload OVA files, import OVA files for your install. You have to use an ESX host here, and you have a different interface. So, and you have to, the install target here is actually an ESXi for 6.0. For U1 we support vCenter. For U1 we support vCenter, but for 6.0 basic, you would have to point it to an ESX host, right? And then very important, as in most VMware environments, time synchronization. So all your components, including your appliance, your Windows host, or whatever components you have, should be time synchronized. So make sure you have NTP enabled and it talking to a reliable time source to make sure that your time is in sync. So from a network standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, we need to have forward and reverse DNS lookups excuse me, working. You need to make sure that your VDS port group is eFormal when you're using ESXi as a deployment target, like, as I mentioned. Prior to U1, you need eFormal target. You need an eFormal port group for this to work. And then the last but not the least, you need to make sure that there's proper routing. Sometimes you might have your PSC on a different network than your vCenter, for example. You need to make sure that all these components can talk to each other and the routing is correct, the gateways and other details are correct. That's very important.
So one thing on that slide, if we go back really quick, the FQDN should be used as your server name. We're going to ask you for your server name. It says you can use your IP address or your FQDN. We highly recommend you using your FQDN because it's going to go into your certificates and it will limit your ability to reconfigure your IP address in the future. So we highly recommend you use FQDN for your server name when you go in. The other thing is with, as Mohan mentioned, your OVF tool deployment won't work for the appliance anymore for 6.0. And so your two options are the UI for deploying the appliance or to use the scripted installer that we've created for the appliance. Right? Okay. And in U1, we support targeting both ESXi and vCenter server.
Okay. So now the next step, we'll actually go through a small demo of the install process itself so that it gives you insight into what goes on during an install. This demo is actually a recording of what's available on that website. So you can go to that website and go through the steps yourself, but we just wanted to give you an insight here. So let's start the demo. So it kind of gives you details of where the documentation can be found and hands-on labs where you can practice. This kind of shows you the hierarchy and the actual files that. So what we're going to do here is actually we're going to install an external platform services controller first. So when you install vCenter, the platform services controller needs to be installed first. If it's embedded, both of them are part of the same process. If it's external, the platform services controller comes first. And so this kind of shows you very quickly what's going on. You need to choose the appliance name, you choose the credentials, and then you go ahead and choose the deployment type. In this case, since we are going external platform services controller, we are choosing to install the platform services controller first. And then followed that by we need to create a new SSO domain. We need to choose what the SSO domain that is. And then kind of do some validation here on the appliance size. And you take it from there. And then you have the storage. Choose the storage where the appliance is. This kind of shows you all the network settings, some of the settings that we had shown earlier. And before we finish, and kind of shows you all the things that you already entered. And so now, since it's all pre-checked and pre-validated, the installation would go pretty smooth. And now the installation of the platform services controller is complete. And so now the next step is we have to go install a vCenter and point it to the platform services controller that we already installed, right? So we need to make sure that certain requirements are met and acknowledge the fingerprint there, choose the appliance name. Here in this case, you're actually installing a vCenter server. It already has a external platform services controller. You point it, you give it the details of the platform services controller you want to point it to. Here you are using the embedded Postgres. For vCenter appliance, you can either use embedded Postgres or Oracle, but the Oracle is being deprecated. You're downloading and installing the appliance. And this also, since it's pre-checked and pre-validated, the vCenter install should go pretty smoothly. And then you're just logging into the appliance to make sure that everything is okay. And this kind of shows you that the install is complete, and then the build version is 6.0. So kind of you can take a look at it, go to the actual website and validate that. You can actually go to the feature walkthrough website. There are a lot of different scenarios. I'm showing you here only install of appliance with external. There's a embedded install for appliance. There's external install for Windows. All these scenarios are actually there in that website. So you can choose what you want and learn from it. So I'll pass it back to the brief. Yeah.
Okay, now time for the harder part, which is upgrade. So as we go through upgrade, we really want you to think about how you phase your upgrade for vSphere. And you really need to start off with your SSO node if it's external and upgrade that first, then upgrade your vCenter, then go to your ESXi hosts and your virtual machines, your virtual infrastructure, so on and so forth. Now the key thing here is that any one of these phases, you can do these, you don't have to do these all at once, right? You can get your upgrade your PSC, your SSO to your PSC, and then keep running, then upgrade your vCenters over time. The one gotcha here, though, to mention is once you upgrade to the 6.0 PSC, you won't be able to add new 5.5 or 5.1 VCs to that PSC. So please be aware of that. The other thing to mention here is that we have this really great KB article that calls out the ordering. And this also covers some of our solution stack so that you make sure that you work through the entire solution stack as you go through and upgrade your vSphere environment. Again, you have to worry about hardware compatibility and interoperability. You have to understand your virtual machine upgrade requirements, and you should make sure that your plugin supports 6.0. I can't say that enough because we've heard a lot of times that, hey, my favorite plugin is not working, and so we need to make sure you need to make sure that the partner is aware that you're moving to 6.0 and that they have the plugin availability for you. Again, approach it from a holistic point of view for your entire virtual infrastructure and plan it out accordingly. Okay, this is the Windows upgrade screen. It shouldn't be very different from what you've seen in the past. vCenter Appliance Upgrade screen is similar to what Mohan just showed you on the install. Instead of the install button, you click on the upgrade button. Once you click on the upgrade button, it gives you this nice little handy message about what versions we support upgrade from for the appliance, and I'll talk to that a little bit in a second. And then it also sort of walks you through the configuration, and here in this screen it's actually asking you for the source VC that you're migrating from. And this is a distinction that I'll call out in the next slide that is very important. So for VCSA upgrade, it is a migration-based upgrade, meaning that you have a source system and it stays in place while we export data from that source system, bring it onto a brand new deployed 6.0 system, and then apply the changes onto the 6.0 system, bring down the previous system, and then bring this one up as your 6.0, with the same identity, same certificates, so on and so forth as your previous system. So it's very different from the Windows upgrade, and the key benefit here is that you can revert to the old appliance if anything goes wrong in this process. Your old appliance is always available for you to bring back up and continue on with if you have any problems. It does require some added infrastructure, so you do need a temporary IP, whether that's DHCP or a temporary static IP, and you definitely need resources for that additional VM to stand it up. For Windows, it's the same upgrade as you're used to. It's in place, and it upgrades the system directly, but because it's upgrading the system directly, it is non-recoverable. So if something were to go wrong, you would really need to restore from backup. So for both of these, we highly recommend, actually standard practice should be to back up your database and your VC prior to embarking on your upgrade. Okay, upgrade paths. So this is a slide on what is supported, from which version to which version we're going to support for upgrade. For vCenter Windows, the Windows platform, for 4X, understand that it's a multi-step upgrade. You're going to upgrade to 5X first and then to 6.0. And for every other upgrade, it's direct from 5.0, 5.1, and 5.5. For VCSA, there was no 4X version of VCSA, so no problem there. For 5.0, we are not supporting upgrade from 5.0 for the VCSA appliance from the 5.0 version up. And for 5.1, you would have to get to update 3 before you could do the upgrade to 6.0. Okay, we're going to walk through a little bit of the paths. These are sort of fairly simple slides, but they're going to sort of tell you about the two different paths you may have in any given upgrade. So for 5.0, you have the potential for going and upgrading your 5.0 deployment to a embedded deployment or to an external PSC deployment. If you were to choose embedded, you would upgrade and you would essentially get the additional components that we now have in 6.0. So you would essentially upgrade and get a 6.0 server. You could also choose to do external deployment, meaning an external PSC. So in this case, you would first deploy an external PSC node, and then you would then upgrade your vSphere 5.0 system and point it to the new PSC that you just deployed. And so you would end up in this configuration. For 5.1, you had an infrastructure that looked like this. You would then upgrade your 5.1 system to 6.0, and you would end up with the new versions of all the components. But you would have to go through the additional manual step of removing your external SSO database. For 5.5, you would upgrade from your 5.5 system to 6.0, and there's no architectural change. There's no real gotcha here. In 5.1 and 5.5, you had the ability to deploy all your components externally, and I put some examples here, but you could have had a lot more. And in this case, again, we're moving to a more prescriptive way of deploying and upgrading your vCenter servers. So what would happen here is you would upgrade your SSO first to a PSC, and then you would upgrade your vCenter server. And during upgrade, what we would do is coalesce the existing systems that are deployed in various different machines and bring them all back into the vCenter server. and you would end up with a system like this. Link mode, for those people that love link mode, you're going to love it a lot more with the enhanced link mode, I guarantee it. But if you have an existing link mode configuration with 5.1 and 5.5 connected to an Atom server, you would have to follow these steps to be able to go and upgrade. First, you would remove the vCenter instance from the link mode group. You would then install a PSC node. And we're really doing replication based on PSC, so that's where all the shared state is for link mode. And then you would upgrade your vCenter server instances and point them to the new PSC node. And you would end up back in link mode. Again, link mode, you would have to be on the same SSO domain, so be careful of some of these gotchas. Okay, best practices. These get a little bit terse, but I'll try and walk you through them. Some of them are very similar to the install. So sizing. Again, we give you recommendations as you go through the upgrade process of what you will need, but please be aware of the sizing requirements of 6.0. They have changed from your previous versions, and your 6.0 is taking more CPU, memory, and disk space, so please be aware of that and size appropriately. Windows OS and database compatibility is really important, and we'll talk also about how you deal with managing your upgrade to a new Windows OS version if you're planning to do that as part of your upgrade to 6.0. VCSA Oracle DB. We've deprecated Oracle DB support for VCSA. It's still supported as of 6.0, but we're saying that we'll probably remove support in the next release. So please be aware if you're using Oracle as an external DB for VCSA. Backup DB and VM prior to upgrade, I've already mentioned that. Again, I'll stress it again. Please back up. And try and stick to the recommended topologies. There's a really great KB article on this. And to walk you through the various topologies that we have. And like I mentioned, there's two main reasons, right, to go to the external PSC. If you want PSC HA and you want link mode. If you don't want those two, I highly recommend you stick to the easier embedded configuration. Network. Again, DNS is really important and proper routing is really important. I'm just echoing what we mentioned in the install best practices. And then, sorry, I'll give you time to take a photo if you want. Okay. Time for synchronization. Use NTP if possible. If not, make sure your time is synchronized across. It will cause you authentication problems. Our certificates are, we're making sure there's no time skew between the machines that are authenticating to each other. And if you have like 3 minutes of lag between the two machines, you're going to have authentication issues. Migrating to a new Windows OS. So there's two possible ways of migrating to a new Windows OS. You're going to upgrade, you can upgrade to 6.0 on the existing host OS, back up the 6.0 database, install a new 6.0 on the new host OS, and then restore the VCDB on the new install. That's one way. The other way is to back up your 5.5 database, install a new 5.5 on the new host OS, restore 5.5 VCDB on the new install, and then upgrade to 6.0. Database compatibility validation logic. Now this is a gotcha. In our upgrade logic, we check to see if your database is compatible as we go through the upgrade. If you use Microsoft SQL Server compatibility mode, our upgrade logic will get confused. There's a really great KB article, again, for this to help you walk you through moving past this problem. So it's probably an upgrade logic. We're also working on fixing that. But if you run into this issue, definitely look at this KB article. Okay, no cameras up. Okay, database password causing install failure. If your database passwords include any of these characters, you will have a problem. And you'll end up with an error message like this. DSN compatibility. Make sure that you have the proper compatibility with your native client version associated with your backing SQL Server or Oracle databases. Use this KB article also to resolve any issues that you may have while upgrading your DSN. So in previous releases, you had the ability to make some changes that would actually end up in a situation with some leftover components. One of them being your SSO. If you moved from a embedded SSO to external SSO and didn't clean up the install for the embedded SSO, if you don't clean this up prior to upgrade, you'll confuse our upgrade logic. You'll think it's an embedded SSO configuration when it's actually external. So we highly recommend you clean up your SSO install, clean up your registry, and get the other thing that I actually noticed today was a customer sent us an email saying, and opened an SR about some indices they added to the vCenter database over time that will also confuse our upgrade logic. So I highly recommend you go through and remove any added indices when you go through. The error message is actually very clear. It'll tell you exactly which indices are bothering us as we go through the upgrade. And then we recommend you remove those indices before you move forward. Okay, there's a fair amount of upgrade resources out there. And we're going to go through a set of recommended reading. There's a set of good KB articles that we're going to point you to at the end as well.
While you're taking photographs, just wanted to add one thing on link mode. So with link mode, enhanced link mode, you can actually have Windows and appliance work together. So that's a big difference in the from the past, where the link mode needed Windows only in the past.
And if anybody's set up link mode in the past, you're going to see a marked improvement. Okay, demo. We're going to do a demo of upgrading 5.5 to 6.0 with an external SSO. And just like Mohan's, it's similar in that it's in the feature walkthrough website. So we get onto your VC machine that's running VC. We get from the ISO, we grab we run the auto run from the ISO. We point to the vCenter server for Windows, and then we install the set of packages that we need to be able to do the upgrade. EULA, because our lawyers love that stuff. And then you're going to sign into your SSO. This is where you get to configure your ports to match your requirements, and then pick the various destination directories where you want the install to actually go. And this is the upgrade of your SSO to the PSC. So this is pointing to your external SSO. I forgot to mention that. It goes to the installation of some new components. It imports the data from the 5X product, and the setup is complete. Now we're going to go through the VC upgrade. Once the PSC upgrade is done, again, same thing. We're going to get to the auto run of the ISO. We're going to pick vCenter Server for Windows, install. In the installer, we're going to click through. Again, the EULA. Here, we're going to give you the administrator credentials for the PSC node that we just upgraded. And we're going to accept the certificate from the PSC node. We're going to put in our custom ports. And here, again, your install directories, if they're changing. And then you're going to click on the upgrade. And it's just that fast. No, I'm joking. One thing I forgot to mention, as part of the upgrade for the migration-based upgrade for the VCSA, again, remember it's migration-based. The more data you have in your database, the longer it will take. So if you really want to constrain amounts of data that you're moving over, you might want to think about that before you embark on that upgrade. Okay, U1. So in U1, we have this repointing tool. Now, a lot of people ask us how we go from embedded configurations to external, and this would be the way you would go about doing that. So if you have an embedded 6.0 machine, you go ahead and upgrade it to U1. Once you're upgraded to U1, you're going to deploy a new external PSC, or if you have an existing one, you could skip this step. With that new PSC, now you're going to replicate that with the embedded PSC that you already have in the vCenter server. After replicating, you're going to repoint using this new tool to the external PSC, and we're going to clean up the PSC that exists internally. So there's this new reconfigure option with this CLI that we have built in that helps you through this. Here's a screenshot of the reconfigure and a help on how the reconfigure works. Okay, also as part of U1, we have a new VCSA Management UI. So if you guys have played with VCSA in the past, this is your historic VMware UI, but much better. In 6.0, we didn't have one. In U1, we've addressed that gap. So it's, again, the 5480 port. And you're going to see a screen like this when you log in. You'll have options to, you can see your overall health. You can see any messages if they're available on your health. You can see which SSO this is connected to this VCSA. And you can create support bundles if your VC is down, for instance, or something. You can do it from here, or reboot or shut down the VCSA from here. You can also, I didn't want to walk through the entire UI, but you can also go through and check for updates. And if there are any updates available, they'll show up here. And you can just click on the install update button once, if an update is available, and they'll update your vCenter server. We also have a PSC Management UI. And that's both, PSC Management UI is both Windows and appliance. The other one is just appliance. And the way you get to this is either through the PSC node URL, or if it's embedded, it would be the VC URL and /PSC. And when you get to the home screen, it's telling you a little bit more what PSC is and what's in it and what's not. And then you can do configuration of and set up policies, identity sources, certificates, so on. And you can also set up your Active Directory as part of this as well. So something to play with when you get the U1 bits. Okay, this is definitely something you want to take pictures of. So here's a list of all the KBs that we think you should look at while you're going through install and upgrade. And then there's another set of, another laundry list of these KBs. So
anyway, after VMworld is over, usually 2 weeks later, you'd also have ways to get into VMworld site and look at the actual presentation would be there. So.
Wait till the cameras are down, but you want to get them ready again for the next slide. Okay. I've read these KBs. They're actually really, really well done, and they actually already have a fair amount of reviews that are 5 stars for a bunch of them. So they're a good resource. Okay. Conclusion, and Mohan's going to drive you home.
So in conclusion, we showed you that vSphere 6 has a lot of compelling features. We showed that the installation workflows for Windows and VCSA are identical and does a lot of pre-checks and other things so that you have a very error-free install or upgrade. And you have multiple streamlined options for upgrade. So we showed you all the different upgrade paths that you can take. We also have many deployment topologies, so we kind of gave you an introduction into that. And we also showed you that in U1 we have a new interfaces for VCSA, PSC, and also we can repoint from embedded to external. So now let's open it for questions.
If you have a question, come to the center mic, and then we'll sort of field questions from there.
I got a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're a customer that is currently on Windows-based vCenter and want to migrate to the appliance. I believe there is a Fling that's been released that is supposed to help with that effort. Problem with Flings, kind of use at your own risk. Do you see effort underway to formalize a migration path to the appliance from other install?
So we're definitely working on it. The Fling is useful for, I think, SQL Server, and so it's a gap that we're well aware of, and we're internalizing actually how to accelerate the delivery of that migration tool to the field.
My question is regarding embedded SSO. So we have 4 virtual centers across 2 locations. They all have embedded SSOs, and right now they're running in linked mode. So is it possible for me to upgrade all the SSOs to embedded PSC and then have all of them talk to each other, or am I way off?
So it is, it works, it is supported, but not recommended. So we want it external. So external is more stable and other things in our testing. The support team feels that if you want to really use link mode, you should have an external.
Why is that?
Because, go ahead.
So the PSC nodes are actually doing replication of state across each other, and as you increase the nodes, your replication topology becomes more difficult to manage. And actually, you're actually sending a lot more data across your network than you really need to. So if you brought a PSC externally, or even 2, the replication between them is finite. And you don't have, like, say, 4. You don't have the bandwidth or the latency or network requirements across, like, say, your 4 nodes. You just have them for those 2. So it's a lot easier. So
in our case, we would just need to have we need to rip out the thing out of the virtual center boxes and have it as a 2 separate additional VMs, right?
Yeah.
And then have F5 in front of that, or?
So if you want to do PSC HA, you would do a F5 or some load balancer in front of your PSC nodes that are replicating. Now, a lot of customers have asked this in private meetings as well, and some of them have said, okay, if my PSC goes down, can I just repoint it and manually if I don't want to do the added step of this load balancer. And yes, you can. So like if the PSC your vCenters were pointed to went down and you had another PSC that was replicating to it, you would use the repointing tool to get over to the other PSC and you would be fine at that point.
And I wouldn't have to talk to networking guys.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
but it's manual. So
By the way, we're also working on how not to have the load balancer requirement for PSCHA.
So I'm currently running the 5.5 appliance, and if I migrate to the 6.1, you said it's a migration. For that migration, does it pull over the folder structure you currently have, or just the settings within Virtual Center?
it's a migration, but it's still, you get all the information from on the upgrade. Whatever you had before, you're going to have it later. It's just that you need, it's a placeholder, right? It creates a placeholder VM, copies everything, it does a lot of, runs a lot of migration scripts, export, import, and then what you had before you'll have.
Okay, so all your VMs, grouped by folders and all that stuff will migrate also?
Yeah.
Everything, and also your host connectivity would move over to that new appliance as well. So the host would be talking to the new appliance as well.
Okay.
So everything that you see in your inventory for your virtual infrastructure, as well as all your configuration, all your database state, whatever else you have in your vCenter will all move over.
Okay, but then the registration of the plugins also happen, or you have to go and register them separately?
No, the registration will move over as well, but it's important to make sure that your plugins actually support 6.0.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, we have 6.0 HA PSCs external, so we're about halfway through our migration. A couple quick questions. I'm kind of reading back and forth. So on external PSCs, what's the maximum number of components you can have register with that? So how many virtual centers? Is there a limit? I think sometimes it's internal that has a limit, or embedded that has a limit.
There's no limit.
There's no limit. That's good. That's what I wanted to hear. Where did syslog and dump log? That used to be an install feature on the Windows piece, and now this kind of disappeared.
Yeah, so for syslog, there is a configuration page inside your sysconfig, inside of NGC now. And you go to sysconfig, and one of your node management parts of 6.0 has your syslog configuration if you want to configure an external syslog. Or are you talking more about the syslog aggregation for your ESX boxes?
Right. So, well, on the Windows side, I used to be able to just have a syslog right there on my Windows Virtual Center, right? And now that poof disappeared. Right?
Okay.
I have to go a different external.
Was that your own syslog, or was that our syslog?
That was yours. We just used it right there, and we could just point it in Virtual Center to point to that syslog on the same Windows host.
So we still have a syslog as part of Windows. So
But I'm
let's talk offline.
I'm using the appliance, right?
Oh, even in the appliance, we have a syslog.
Okay.
And you can configure that syslog to aggregate your ESX logs to that syslog, and you can also set up so that it actually sends your syslog stream to, say, a Splunk or a login site.
Okay. And then last one. So we did run into a problem in an upgrade from 5.5 to 6, and it's around authentication, and I wanted to know if it might be fixed in update 1. And so that is, if you're using old style authentication permissions, so NetBIOS name / username. As soon as you upgraded to 6, you could see it in the FAT client, but you could not see it in the web client. And we had to work with BCS to go through and change it to DNS name / user. Or are you familiar with that?
I don't, but if you give me your email address and write that question down, I'll get an answer for
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Okay. Okay, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to take maybe 2 more questions. Is that okay? No? Okay. So why don't we do this? We're going to go outside and stand outside, and for any questions that you may have, we'll answer them outside.
Yeah,
Okay? Thanks, everyone.
thank you.